How you doing? I'm Adam Bunting, principal of CVU High School, and I'm here today with Ty Sells of Youth to Youth. He is a drug and alcohol prevention specialist, and we are talking kind of about everything, and we'll go from there. So one of the things, we've talked a lot about connection, we've talked a lot about kind of some of the ideas around prevention. One of the things that I'm interested in is it feels like there's a lot of misconception and myth out there right now, particularly about marijuana use.
Yep.
Can you speak to that a little bit for the young people in our community and the adults in our community?
Sure.
Actually?
You realize though that once this plays, a lot of people are going to get mad at me, so you're going to have to deal with all that.
That's fine. I'm good with that.
Because I'm leaving. It's on you. So, no, a couple ways to look at it, and I think the approach that we've taken historically. That preventionists and adults who work in this type of field has been, it's been lacking, I guess. And what's the tendency? If we don't want young people to do something that's not healthy for them, what do? We say don't do it, or we attempt to scare them away from us. I don't know if your parents use scare tactics. Mine did. Remember, if you sit too close to a TV, what's going to happen?
Right, you're going to go blind.
Everything was going to make us blind. Then they also said, if you made a face, what's going to happen?
Right. Yeah.
It'll stay that way, right? There's no science to back any of that up, but we still try and do that, you know. And so what you think? Let's go drug prevention. Yeah. This is your brain. This is your brain on drugs. They'd hold up that egg and then fry that egg, and then they'd say, any questions? I'm like, yeah, do I get toast with my brain? Like, or is it just, you know? So the idea is that that's our natural tendency to go back to that because we think it'll scare them. But what we're missing is young people's brain development keeps them from understanding. They know that bad stuff can happen. It's just never going to happen to them at this point. Right. All of us were young at one point. If YouTube was around when I was a kid, I would have had a full channel of me doing stupid things. Now, if it's icy out, I'm like holding stuff so I don't fall and break a hip. You know what I mean? So I get that bad stuff can happen to me. They don't get that at this point. Or even if they do, it adds a thrill component to it that we have probably gotten over. You know, so scaring them or saying it's going to hurt you. So instead of talking about what can happen, what we try to focus on is what does happen and take them through the process of how addiction actually works. So we talk about that there may be a window of time you can do this and nothing happens, you know, and then as you move on, it's the progress, you need more to get high, you know, all that stuff till you become dependent. And then addiction actually is when your normal changes, when you accept a lower quality of life, but you're still preoccupied with using. So what happens is, that's the way we can approach it, so you can actually find yourself in this process instead of saying, you do this, this is going to happen. If I say you do this, you're going to die. You do this, you're going to be dumb. What has to happen for me to be right? Right. They have to die, right? And the other thing is, even if you say you're going to be dumb, like there is research that shows you can lose 8 IQ points. 8 points off your IQ. Is that a lot? Do they know if that's a lot? If you're a genius, I sat next to a kid named Dennis in my art class growing up. He smoked more weed than anybody I knew. More weed. Kid got 4.0, straight A's. My mom would be like, why can't you be more like Dennis? I'm like, I can't afford the weed, Mom. Like, I don't know what to tell you in this, you know? So using those things to try and scam isn't going to be the effective way. What I try to find is I do a couple things. First of all, it's got to be accurate and it's got to be relevant. The relevant is the key part. Do you know how many chemicals there are in a joint?
No clue.
Do you know how many cannabinoids?
No clue.
There's over 400. After you light it, there's over 2,000. There's 61 cannabinoids. That doesn't change behavior because it's not relevant. No one cares, right? Honestly, no one cares. So what I try to do is open up, and a couple things I try and keep in mind is, first of all, I want to be practical. I want the message to be receivable. I want it to be interesting, memorable, and engaging. Just think of the word prime. I try and leave that out there, and whenever I'm trying to engage with them, that's the approach I want to take. So the way we do that is by making it relevant right off, is I ask them, what do you believe? Why is pot no big deal? You know, why is it safe? And they make a list, they give me a great list of them. And you can probably guess some of the reasons they use. Right. Do you know any of the reasons?
That people use?
Not why they use, but what their reasons are for it's safe or it's no big deal.
Oh, I've heard plenty. I mean, one of my favorites is it's natural.
It's natural. Yeah. That's one of their go-tos, and so you
can. I was like, so it's falling off a cliff.
Right. But you could say it's natural. I tend to go. So I'll take all of theirs in first. They give me 7. I can tell you what the 7 are. But we always get the same 7. And I'll write them down, right? But you take them first, and that's how you make it relevant. Now, where'd the information come from, me or them? Right. Them. So I've got their information now. So now, all I got to do is attack each of those points. Also, it allows for me to be not as bright as a lot of people are that talk about this stuff, because I don't have to talk about all the street names or what exactly does it. I can address the 7 things that they're already thinking. So when they say, they'll say it's not addictive. They say you can't overdose. They say you can't die from it. They say it's legal, it's medical, it's natural, and it's not as bad as literally any other drug, is what they're. So not as bad as, we knocked that off the board right away by saying, is that really an argument for safety? You can jump off a 2-story building, you can jump off an 8-story building. It's not as bad, but does it make it safe?
Right.
Okay, you can take that one off. They'll give me that one. Then the next one we talk about, natural is my favorite. I say name 10,000 things that are natural, but aren't safe. I'll start rattlesnakes. Who's next? You know, and they start flowing through all these, and they'll get to the poisons, poison oak, poison ivy. I'm like, if poison's in the title, it's from every other drug that they told me is horrible earlier comes from a natural plant generally. Right. So natural doesn't equal safe, right? Do not hear this. Those of you that want to argue or debate this, I'm not saying natural is unsafe. I had a lady once raise her hand and said, you can't say natural is unsafe. I'm like, who would make that argument? Right. You know, but what I'm saying is just calling something natural doesn't equal safe. Use your essential oils, do whatever you want, but what I'm saying is just calling something natural doesn't equal safe, right? So natural isn't safe. It is addictive. You know, that's one of the misconceptions, not addictive. 1 out of 11 adults, if we start smoking it, 1 out of 11 of us will become addicted. That's 9%, roughly the same as alcohol, which is about 1 in 12. Problem is, young people, they smoke it, drops to 1 in 6. If they smoke it daily, drops to 1 in 4 because of brain development, right? That's highly addictive for them. The trick is the addiction looks differently because marijuana is fat soluble, so it actually stays in your body longer. So if I'm addicted to alcohol, this isn't alcohol by the way, I don't know why I pointed at that. They're not doing anything, it's just water. So, but if I were to be addicted to alcohol, I take a drink, that process through my body in an hour. So if I'm addicted, it's no longer in my body craves it. If I'm addicted to weed and I smoke and I don't have any weed on me, it's gonna be in there for 14 to 28 days, so the addiction looks different. And that's why people, because I'm weaning, right? It's a self-weaning thing, so it doesn't look the same. It's still in my brain, because the brain's one of the fattiest parts. It's still in my brain, but it's impacting it while it's in my brain, but I don't show withdrawal symptoms the same way. So those are a couple. The overdosing, and that's generally from edibles, so I no longer can say you can't overdose, you know. Legal, none of these states that have passed it for teens. So when they say legal, well, not for you. Right. So that even the people that wanted it passed said, you know what, it's not right for young people. So these are all, and I could, this is usually an hour we could do this on.
I had a question around, you know, I talk with teens all the time about anxiety, and I feel like I'm seeing a big connection between kind of anxiousness and then the psychoactive piece of marijuana that no one really talks about.
Let me hit that real quick. So a couple things about that. First of all, one of the things it's supposed to treat as a medicine is anxiety, right? Yeah. Now, check this out. I have issues with food. I don't know if you can guess that. It's the camera. It added 150 pounds, right? So, but I have issues with food. So the idea is that I realize that if I can get frustrated, upset, or anxious, sometimes if I eat, I feel better. Yeah. If I feel alone while I'm on the road, sometimes I get a Big Mac, suddenly I don't feel that bad, right? If I'm anxious and I eat a box of Pop-Tarts, does that make those medicine? Right. No, right? It doesn't. Feeling good and being therapeutic are two different things. And so just because something, and again, it gets back to what we talked about before, is that there are other ways to cope with anxiety. There are other ways to cope with stress. There are other ways that are far more healthy. But what we've done is somehow, again, put a medicine, and yes, what happens too is once you're addicted, you still have that psychological component to the addiction, much like our phones. Like it's not a physical addiction, but if I don't have my phone on me, I get a little freaked out, right? If I don't have pot with me and I'm addicted, then I am now creating this anxiety, this stress that pot's supposed to be helping me, and now we've created this little cycle, you know? And lastly, when they say the legal thing, one of the things that's my favorite about that is the backward cyclical nature of that logic that doesn't make sense. When you say, the number one, when I said not as bad as, they all say alcohol. Why not as bad as alcohol? It's done more damage to our society than any other drug. Sorry parents, but it's math here. So it's done more, all of them totaled up. All these epidemics that we deal with, none of them done the damage that alcohol has. So the idea is that, watch this, why is alcohol the worst? It's accessible. Why is it accessible? Because it's legal. Let's make marijuana legal. Yeah. Do you see the problem? So And what happens is there's a tipping point that when we lower the perception of risk of something and we increase its availability, which is what's happened in my state of Ohio, your state here, that's when it becomes an issue for young people. They're different than you, their brains aren't fully developed, and it's going to impact them and they have no say in it. So it'll disproportionately impact them than it will us as adults. And everybody says keep it away from the kids. Well, we'll keep it away. Once we regulate it, we'll keep it away from the kids, right?
Yeah.
So what's the number one chemical, the number one drug that you have to deal with here in your school, not in the school, but that you hear your kids dealing with at the parties and the stuff on the weekends?
It's interesting. Alcohol is one that I would have brought up.
Alcohol is
sure,
the number
but,
one everywhere.
Yeah.
But kids aren't supposed to have that.
Right.
And somehow it still finds their way to them. So, because
the other thing I wanted to ask about was vaping. I mean, vaping has gotten, from a school administrator perspective, it's pretty annoying.
Yeah,
at
this
this point, it's like smells like.
Do you have a whole collection of vape utensils now left?
We tossed those pretty.
Okay,
quick.
good.
Yeah.
All right.
But I can smell that cotton candy
right.
kind of glycol-y smell.
Yeah.
And
And that's the thing. It gets back to again what we talked about earlier. I get a lot of people pressure me to do vaping presentations now, and I'll make one up. I'll come do a vaping presentation, but we're back to not dealing with the teen, the kid, the student. We're not making that connection. We're developing the next. We're reacting. We're not responding. So response is through that authentic connection we talked about.
Yeah.
Reaction is, let's get them some information. Let's make sure, and then we can check it off our list of things that we did. Well, we had a workshop.
Right.
We had a speaker come in. I don't want to come in and just do that. Like I was telling you earlier, me coming in, I tell people, if this is your prevention, all of this one day, this 1 hour, then you're not doing prevention.
Yeah.
So I mean, you're right, but vaping is this. We're still dealing with the same issues that we are with marijuana and alcohol. Some of the others. So
yeah, I wish I could publish some of the. I mean, no one talks about the inspirational stories, and no one talks about the actual prevention, right? 'Cause it's hard to see prevention. You see someone being
100%.
healthy a lot of times. If I wish I could just shout out to the world the number of kids who I've seen come into this school who were in a position where they were struggling, and then found that relationship we talked about, found that team, found like this belief in self that didn't exist. And that's the stuff I want to shout
the research
about.
shows us that's far more effective.
Yeah.
So instead of talking about the downside of the negative behaviors, what's the upside of the positive things that have happened? So what we need to be promoting is not the 16, 20%, I don't know what your numbers are, 20% of kids that are smoking. You highlight the 80% and remind them, hey, look, we're doing some really good stuff here. That tends to be far more effective because what happens is we focus on the problem becomes way bigger.
Right.
So we keep talking about the 10% of the kids that are consuming 50% of the alcohol, and we normalize that. Like, this is what everybody's doing. In reality, at least in my community, I don't know here, but in my community, most young people, 60% still aren't using underage. Mm-hmm. And then the ones that are, the other, 30% of them are still making healthier decisions regarding it. There is still that 10% that's doing 50%, and that's what we're always talking about. We're always reacting to the worst thing, and then we end up teaching bad information and focusing on what could happen, not looking at what does happen. I would say that's a great approach. Start highlighting some of those stories. We used to do panels with recovering kids coming in to talk. We stopped doing that. We talk about the kids that grew up in the same neighborhoods but had the skills and resiliencies. What did you do to be successful? Why did you never start? And that is exactly, you're onto it, and you're allowed to do it. You're the principal. You can do whatever you want. So you're allowed to do it, right? So good.
Well, I appreciate the approach of a strength-based look at things as opposed to fear. Because when we operate from fear, we never make good decisions, and we don't make good connections with people.
That's right.
Because that's what we feel. And we used to have this fish tank in the building, this reef tank. I became head of the science department at one point and felt like I needed to do something fancy for the school. We had this big tank. And I was like,
cool.
all of a sudden I'm like, oh my God, there's this 200-gallon fish tank that I now have to take care of, right?
And the fish too.
I couldn't con anyone else into doing it, except for a fifth grader, but that was actually a good move. And I remember looking at the organisms within the tank, and I began to learn more about the pH in the water, and I began to realize that anxiety functioned a little bit like that pH in the water, right? Like you can't see it.
Right.
I guess you could measure it, But when an individual organism starts feeling the pH in the water change, then they too start secreting,
react, they respond.
things that start to degrade the environment. And sometimes when we talk about our fears about our children, we get into that anxiousness. We read the media, and all people feel is that fear, as opposed to looking at kind of those lines of progress that we're making when we look at like youth risk behavior survey.
That's right.
Past 20 years, kids are a lot safer than they used to be.
Yeah.
Now.
Yeah.
If you look at that data.
Yeah.
One of my favorites, this last story I'd end with was I went through this period my junior year in high school where I was pretty unhappy, dude. Like I was anxious, and I remember like just like not being able to talk to anybody about it. And finally, I like lived with it for like 6 or 7 months. And I finally went and talked to my mom. I'm like, Mom, like, oh, this is how I'm feeling. Like I'm feeling alone. And she turned to me. She's like, yeah, it sounds like you're normal.
Yeah.
It's like, sounds like you're a human. Like,
yeah.
like it's just been a hard period. And she didn't minimize it, but
no.
she also wasn't like, okay, let's like, let's medicate you. And and I was like, I just had this sense of like, whew,
yeah.
like this relax.
But one of the things that is get young people that are feeling some of that, one of the things I found to be really successful is to lock them into doing service.
Yeah.
And
right.
then and it's not comparative, but it's like, oh, it's not, mine's not as bad as yours. It's that, oh, I'm part of all this.
Right.
So that's
and
great.
It's about finding purpose, right?
Yeah.
Like, and I see this with our seniors all the time. They are so stressed about getting into college.
Yeah.
If you can flip it a little bit and be like, listen, what's your duty in the world?
Right.
Like, what's your responsibility in the world? Then all of a sudden they're like, oh wait, it's not just me.
Yeah.
It's, well, I can make the most of anywhere I go, because
that's right.
Like that's the opportunity I'll be given, and that's my purpose, and that, and
and that's the trick. We monetize purpose.
Right.
So find something you're great at and go make a lot of money at it. Use it to get in the right college, and then you can make millions on it. What if college wasn't part of the equation? Sorry again, but I'm saying, what if you just said, I have this purpose, and my purpose is defined by how it impacts others,
right.
not how much money I can make off of it. I work with young people. I'm not getting rich doing this, but there's nothing that's been more my purpose than what I've done for 30 years. And that's why I can live in it and be comfortable with whatever it's provided me. It's provided way more than I thought, to be honest, but that wasn't the goal. The goal was, let me live in this purpose for a long time and see what happens.
I feel like I want to talk to, like, every student, I feel like should hear that message. And it should be, we get so focused on happiness.
Yeah.
And you know what? Happiness comes and goes for people, but if you're content and you're confident, I am leading a meaningful life right now,
yeah.
You know what? That does a lot. I had a student say to me yesterday, he said, you know what? I think, sometimes I think that part of having a purpose or part of finding your purpose is just finding your purpose. He's like, it's that journey. I was like, oh yeah, dude.
Yes,
like,
100%.
Yeah, you're right on, man. It's not always at your fingertips, but.
I love it. Well, if you want them all to hear it, you can. If you know somebody, you can maybe get me on stage.
Yeah, I'm working on that.
But this has been great. I really enjoyed this. So thanks a lot,
man.
Thanks for having me in here. I appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
All right.